Hey everyone, welcome to Pianist Academy. I am Charles Szczepanek. It's good to see all of you here again today. Hello, Rhodesy, Bedlington Groomer, Rob, C Drive, Nancy, Alexis, David, June. Welcome to everybody. I wanted to kick off today's stream with two big announcements, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A session. But there are a couple things I'm really excited to share with you. I know I haven't been posting quite as often, but there's a good reason for that. And hey, Nathaniel, I think I probably mentioned it on the streams before. Hey, Dith and Brad, good morning from me to all of you. So for the last month and a half, 6 weeks, I have been working on a new huge course on how to practice better. I think I'm going to call it Mastering Your Practice. And as of this morning, I'm 4.5 hours through the edit of the material, and I'm about halfway done. So it's going to be like a 7 to 8 hour project course that is just got so much packed into it. So I'm super excited to share that with all of you, and I'm hoping it will come out later this month or definitely next month. That's the first thing. Second update. I mentioned this at the end of the last stream, but I wanted to get it in right at the beginning of this one. One of my primary teachers, Robert Hamilton, I don't have a picture of him to show, but Robert Hamilton is coming here to the studio to film a bunch of content with me. And we have a bunch of topics that we've planned to talk about. But I would love to hear from all of you if there's anything you'd like discussed, or if there are particular questions you have. Robert Hamilton was a gold medalist in the Busoni competition, I believe in the late 50s. And he had an extensive touring career as a concert artist before settling into teaching at the university level from, I think, the 1980s until he just retired a couple of years ago. I think he's around 85 years old at this point. Anyway, I'm so excited for him. He's going to be here and next week. So if there are questions that you'd like answered, please leave them not in the chat here, but in the comments below this video. I would love to know that. If there are questions that you have for somebody like that, really could be anything. Or you could email me. My email address is always listed in the description of these videos. So you could always do that as well. I just really wanted to mention that because I know there are a bunch of people that watch these streams after they're live, and many of them probably did not hear that from the last stream. So I just wanted to mention those two before we get started. At Bedlington Groomer, I am glad that you're excited for the practicing course. C Drive says you'll have to practice more, so you're good enough. No, that's not true. That's not true. It's all about getting more done in less time and how we can go about doing that. And I think that's something everybody wants to be able to do. We want to be able to learn more faster in less time. Yeah. And Rhodesy, you say, you've got a new prelude and you've memorized half of it. Okay. Hey, Rhodesy, when you get it ready for us, Rhodesy's working on a new composition, and I requested that he send in a performance of him playing it, not just a computer-generated one. So, Rhodesy, when you get to it, we'd love to hear it. Hello, Antonio. And Dith, congrats on finishing level 6. Did it go well for you? Did you get some good comments? Remind us what you played on your level 6 exam. Was one of the pieces the Chopin A minor waltz? I think that's in level 6 RCM. And Alexis, you say you started practicing Winter Wind to challenge yourself, and you're having trouble with the 11th bar, right hand. Okay, some arpeggios. Sounds good, Alexis. Rob, sounds good. And Rhodesy, you say it should be ready for the next stream. Great. And Whitney, hello, Whitney. I'm glad you could join us again. And Dith said you haven't gotten your comments yet, but you think it went well. Awesome. Awesome. Well, great. And if you haven't said hello on the stream, please drop a line in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I got two questions. If you had a chance to glance at the description of this video, I got two questions sent in ahead of time. So we're going to start with those two today. And then anything else you'd like to talk about, we will jump into. Hello, Joseph. Okay, let me pull up the question first from June. I've also realized that the chat that I'm reading is very small. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Oh, that's better. I won't have to squint now. Glasses only go so far. Let's see. Rhodesy, you say, have you ever heard of Brad Kella? I've not. And Dith, here was your rep that you played. Handel Sarabande in D minor, Beethoven Bagatelle. Okay, we talked about that one, I think. The Chopin A minor waltz, and a Czerny etude in Autumn Leaves. Czerny, yeah, I love autocorrect. That's great. Level 7 is way harder. You know, I think the really, really big jumps in difficulty, and this is, I think, goes for everybody. I think the really big jumps in difficulty in RCM especially happen, around level 7, 8, and 9. Things get considerably more difficult really quickly. The Bach inventions get introduced in level 8, and usually the students I have that are around that level, that Bach is what they struggle with the most out of everything. The Sinfonias get introduced in level 9. The Well-Tempered Clavier gets introduced in level 10. So that's not that far off. Dith, how long did it take you to prepare everything for the exam? Because I remember talking, the first invention, Dith, so not the very first, not number 1, but invention in F is, you're right, it is level 7. Most of the others are level 8. Dith, how much time did you spend preparing for the exam? Let us know. And I would love to come back and revisit that, especially if other people have questions about preparing repertoire, preparing kind of, this is like a program of repertoire for those exams. You said 6 months with a brief break in the middle. Yeah. So Dith, I would start to plan on more like 6 to 12 months for the levels as you continue to progress. So maybe 7 or 8 months for level 7, maybe 8 to 10 months for level 8, and then 9 and beyond you might want a full year on each level. Remember, RCM tops out kind of at level 10, and beyond that is diploma level. And of course you can take the diploma exam, but that's the diploma level repertoire is like everything that wasn't in the earlier levels, so it's really expansive, and it covers Henley levels like 6, 7 through 9. So it's a really, really wide range of difficulty. Anyway, let's jump into June's question. And thanks for sharing all that, Dith. So June had a question about you're starting to work on holding pitches in one hand while needing the other side of the hand to continue playing. So for example, holding something and playing. So holding, for example, I'm holding with the thumb and then playing something with the other part of the hand. And you say, on the first 2 bars of a piece that you sent over, which I'm going to show in a second, your right hand gets a lot of tension in it, and probably stemming from holding pitches because we've never done this before. So you're asking for some tips about that. Let me show the piece that you're working on, and let's dive in. Okay, so this is In the Quiet House by Christopher Norton. And you can see in both hands, we have holds. And there's also a more advanced concept here that I want to touch on. But if anybody has any ideas what that's going to be, it has to do with the pedal and the topic at hand. Think about it. I'm going to ask you when we finish talking about the particulars of holding pitches. But let's start with this first. Okay, so we have holds in the bottom of both hands. Bar 1, bar 2. And this piece is really a study in that as you continue to look through the piece. measure after measure, we have a similar content, right? Okay, so June, the first thing that I want to mention is let's make sure that we have a great understanding of just how little effort or force it takes to hold a key down. The way that June, do you have an acoustic instrument that you practice on, or are you practicing on a digital? I asked the question because that might influence a little bit of what I spend time on talking about. Okay, a digital. Okay. So, June, I'd experiment with how little effort, after you play a note, how little weight does it take to continue to hold that key down? Can you, like in slow motion, can you release a note? And as you release that note, let me do it with 5 so you can see that just a little bit better. As you release the note by moving the arm up, focus on the feeling of the key actually pushing your finger up. And feel just how little effort is involved in letting that key rise. It's extremely small, extremely little effort, extremely little weight. We want to be sure that we have a good grasp on that when we begin to add holds in a part of the hand and playing in the other, because the hold should never be, we should never be pushing on the key that we're holding. All we should be doing is holding with that minimum amount of weight it takes to keep the key down. And where your tension is coming from is probably that as you play this D and you're trying to play the upper part of the hand, as you're playing the D and moving the other fingers, the D is probably pressing into the key far more than it needs to. So if we're pressing, as soon as we begin to press, there's a lot of tension in the underside of the palm, especially near the thumb, because that's the finger I'm using. So June, if you're feeling that here, that's where that's stemming from. There's too much pressing. And if we learn to release that, and remember, feel like we don't actually want to release the key, so we don't want to let the key come up, but just how little it takes to hold that key down. In fact, I would err on the side of, if you happen to let the thumb go, I would much rather that happens and you don't quite hold it down the whole time than holding with a push at the bottom of the key. Another thing that you can do to practice this is, I'm skipping ahead of myself. Am I skipping ahead? No, this is good. Let's take the 2 fingers that are the outermost fingers, 1 and 5. And we want to hold 1. So let's feel like we can do a little bit of rotation and pivoting around 1, but 1 is never pressing into the key. We're not holding it down with a lot of force. This is just an exercise. And we're going to play 5 while we rotate on 1. And this is going to play right into what you need to do in the piece as well. You could try doing this with 5. So you can see the little, we'll call them micro rotations in the hand here. And while I'm doing this, the thumb is just barely holding the key down. It's a little bit like a pivot. You could also do the same thing with 3rd finger. And this is all very light. Let me stress that. Everything is pianissimo, extremely light touch, so that we're really focused on not pressing and not holding too much. Okay, those 2 things kind of go together. I think that's what I wanted to say about that. Let me jump to the next part. As you're working on the piece itself, so each of the slurs given, think of each of those marks as a point where we actually, every note, there's some wrist movement involved that can aid us in articulating all this. So we're not doing it with fingers only. Fingers only it doesn't have to accentuate the push into the D that we're trying to hold, but it can inadvertently. So each of these notes, and I'll zoom in on my hand in a second. We're looking for a rotation away from 5 and away from 3. And then where 1 plays, we have to lift. So that D ends up getting lifted right there, and it stays lifted. And then we hold that note down to continue playing, right, the whole note. So let me zoom in on my hands for a second. I'll show you both directions. Top, so as we play with 5, there are little micro rotations away from 5. And then to 3, there's a wrist movement that you'll see better from the side angle when I show you in a second. So the wrist is fluid and active. Oh, that leads me to one other point. Let me finish this up. I'll show you the same thing from this angle. And then I have another little tip for you. Okay. So focusing on wrist movement, little micro rotation away from 5, and then a wrist movement up. Just show the movement of the slur. This and all of the fluidity in the wrist is also something you can practice with just holding that single pitch. So if we're just holding the thumb, can you practice holding the thumb and moving the wrist around? You could move it in circles, you could move it up and down, you can move it side to side. And the more fluid we can stay with the wrist while the thumb holds, the more we're going to train ourselves that this hold of the pitch isn't pushing. The more we're pushing and the more effort we're putting into the key, the less mobile the whole rest of the mechanism becomes. And we want mobility, we want fluidity, right? So keep this as loose as you can. And this is great practice, just on that single pitch. And it's going to be the same thing you want to do when you start the piece as well. Yeah? I think those are my tips for you, June. Do you have any questions about that? I see. Nathaniel, you said, is pressing the same as resting the weight of the hand and the arm on that finger? No. So if you think of a completely relaxed arm weight, I don't remember how heavy the average arm is. It's quite heavy. A couple pounds at least. So when we drop in with arm weight, we might be releasing more of that. For example, if we play a chord and we're playing with more weight, we get a bigger tone. But if we let weight rest without structure and without support, we also become really immobile. So we don't want that either. We want the weight of the arm to be supported so that it's it's almost like a feather. Our hand should almost feel like a feather on the keys. So most of the weight of the arm is actually being held away from the key bottom. When we play, we can drop more in. But after we play, it's only just enough, which amounts to a few grams of weight. It's just enough to keep the key down. It's less than sounding the note. Even the quietest note in the first place, a pianissimo strike, takes far more weight to play and to get the hammer to strike the string than the weight necessary to keep the key down. That was a great question, Nathaniel. Let's not get confused between the two. And especially if there's a big focus in your learning on using arm weight to play, we never want to let the weight of the arms rest in the key bottom, because that will hamper us in the long run. There's always a balance between letting the weight release and then providing support, because if we just let the hands drop without support, in an extreme case, this is what happens, right? Everything just collapses. So we're taking support a level further. Not only do we support in the bridge and in the wrist and in the elbow, right? But now we're also saying that the arm itself, it's like feeling this motion that I'm doing right now. So I'm not pushing the hand down. I'm adjusting as I lift and drop into the key. I'm just adjusting how much weight I'm allowing gravity to take. That's easy, somewhat easy to describe. It's very hard to do. It takes practice. But we're always looking for that balance of support, because too much drop, and now we're also stuck. Even if there is no tension in the hand, the immense amount of weight is going to stop us from being able to move around. Good. Hey, Noteworthy, welcome. Let's see. June, your follow-up question is it cheating to let the pedal hold the note for you? And that is the second topic I wanted to cover about this example. First, let me go back and say one more thing to those people here who have an acoustic piano who want to work on the same thing. There's a little trick I like to employ, but it only works on acoustic instruments. At the bottom of the key on an acoustic, on a grand, I don't believe uprights have this. It's been a while. I'd have to check. But there's let off at the bottom of the key. And at the bottom of the key, as you play on an acoustic, there's a little bump, especially if you depress the key very slowly. There's a little where the finger drops the rest of the way. This isn't on most digitals. I don't even think the really high-end digitals have let off. You can use that little bump to help tell you you could release the key to just above where the let off happens. And it won't release the note. But you see, if I release to the point where I'm above that bump, I don't have to release the key, and there it is. I can strike the pitch again because the let off allows. There it is. That allows the mechanism inside to reset. That's what gives grand pianos such fast repetition, is that the key doesn't need to return all the way to the top. It only needs to return a fraction of the key travel before we can restrike. Yeah? You can feel that little bump. Oh, Antonio says most recent digitals do have let off. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks for that update, Antonio. If you do have a digital and it has it, you can also use this tip. Look for that point, look for that bump, and as you release the key, that is all the weight you need, is the remaining force that it takes to hold the key down above the let off. Now, in Nancy, it has something to do with the escapement, and I'm not sure if that is the actual piece of the action that has to do with double escapement, or if the double escapement is related to the let off. I am getting my terms mixed up. Antonio says yes. I know they're related, but I couldn't tell you exactly how. So back where I was. Okay, yes, if you allow the key to rise to that point where you feel that is all the weight you need. Now, in practice, we're not ever going to release the key above that point. We're going to keep the key down at the key bed, probably. But it takes the same amount of force. So you can start to learn how little that is by letting the key rise back part way, and then let that little bit of resistance near the bottom of the key show you just how little effort it takes. And if you happen to go back down, you're going to have some tactile feedback. There's going to be a little bump that you're going to feel in your fingertips, and that's going to tell you started to press again. So that is another thing. So if you have a digital that can do that, wonderful. And if you have an acoustic grand that can do that, wonderful. And we can use that tip as well. Let's go back to June's question. You said, is it cheating to let the pedal hold the note? Let me put the music back up because I want to give everybody a chance to chime in. Let's see, I erased our marks, but I won't put any marks on. Let's leave it just the way it is. There are whole notes. There are all kinds of holds in these first 3 bars. Are there any times... How is the pedal... Let me put it this way to everybody. How is the pedal aiding the holds? And are there any ways in which the pedal might not be so great? Even though the pedal is marked by the composer... Let's see what you all have to say about that. So we're trying to dive deeper into what the score is saying instead of taking everything quite at face value. And this is something you'll have to do as you become more and more advanced, especially where there won't be pedal markings given by the composer. Hello, Julio. While you all think about that, I'm just going to answer a few things in the chat. Well, maybe I won't. Joseph, I'm going to come back to your question. Let's see. We also have a great question from Mellow Vibes. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to those. There isn't anything I could answer in a very short time. Let's see. So, okay. Some of you are saying, Noteworthy is saying, deep pedal could be a problem. It will blur the sound. Joseph says, pedal markings say to hold through the measure. Yes. And Joseph, I see your other question. Yes. Anything else? June, okay, you have a follow-up question. If you follow the markings that are given, then how does the composer intend bar 11, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 into 12 to sound if you pedal at the start of bar 12? Okay, we'll come to that in a second. Mellow Vibes, you said you feel like you let off pedal when you notice too much dissonance that doesn't belong. That's a great way to approach pedaling, for sure. Okay, let's dive more in depth about this. If there was no pedal marked at all, so if we pretend, I think I can actually even get rid of it, most of it. If we pretend that there's no pedal marked, here's what it would sound like. Next bar. We still, if we follow all of the sustain that's marked, the finger sustain, if we follow all of it and truly hold the G, the D, that D, hold it again there, we do the same thing in the subsequent bars, right? Hold the C again, etc. We still get all of that sustain. And a bonus is that the melody stays really clear and we actually hear the slurs. You could say that is a much more difficult way to play the piece. Our finger sustain has to be really, really good. But it's also going to introduce a few little hiccups and bumps. And those hiccups and bumps come from the fact that we have repeated pitches and that we can't show sustain. We can't use finger legato or finger sustain to hold those pitches down. The pedal can help us out. But what happens if we use the pedal that's marked on the page? It's very different. It's much more contemporary sounding. There's a lot more blur, right? Also, the sense of slur in bar 1, It's all gone. In bar 2, right? We might be able to show a tiny little bit of it, but the real separation that we get when we don't use pedal, right? We don't hear that anymore. We can hear 5% of it, maybe. And what else happens? The melody, if that truly is the top line, the melody has gotten completely blurred. Okay, Christopher Norton is a contemporary composer. It's probably fine. And if this were something from the French Impressionist period, that would also probably be fine to play like that. But what if we didn't have the pedal markings, but we had the same notation, and this were from Beethoven? What would we do? Would we play completely without pedal? Probably not. But would we play completely with pedal? No, probably not either. We'd want to still show the melody without so much blur. And so what I end up doing is taking pedal there and there and there, and then again, bottom, bum, bum, bum. And then that's my pedaling, because I want the smoothness that the pedal provides, especially the connection across repeated pitches. I want that because I don't want there to be breaks. Because, well, if it was Mozart, maybe we would, but we're saying it's Beethoven, for example. And throughout all of this, even though we're using the pedal in a much more advanced way, we still need to show and actually use the finger sustain marked by the score. Because if we don't, let's say we let that D go in bar 1 from the right hand. As soon as the pedal would change here, we'd lose that resonance. We'd lose that sustain. If the pedal changed. Right? Same thing, if we let the G go there, what we'd get is... And it turns into only 2 voices, 2 textures, instead of something more with more depth and more complexity. This way of looking at pedaling is really important as you start to study more and more advanced music. Because what the composer is truly telling us, if there were no pedal marks again, is they want some things sustained. That sustain shows, okay, we have to always ask 2 questions. Is it done with the fingers? Is it done all with the fingers? Is it done mostly with the fingers? Is it done all with the pedal? And the context, the period, the composer, what else is happening in the measure, the context around it will tell us whether we can use all pedal or a little pedal or no pedal. Tim had mentioned Bach, a Sinfonia. If this were Bach, no pedal. You would do all of the sustain with fingers. There's another component to Bach, just to mention for Tim. Many times you don't actually need to sustain the entire duration, maybe like 3/4 of the duration marked, or 7/8 of the duration marked. So there are still other things that can help us move the hand around in Bach, because we want to, again, depends on the context of the phrase. Sometimes we want to show a little break to show articulation and to show difference in voices. Sometimes not. But let's go back to this piece to answer June's particular question, which is, first of all, is it cheating to let the pedal hold the note for you? In this piece, and because of the reason you're studying it, yes. Because you're studying it so that you can learn how to hold certain parts of the hand, certain fingers, while the rest of the hand does something. And that's an extremely important skill. For the reasons we just talked about. In the future, we want to choose do how much finger sustain do we use versus how much pedal do we use. So we want to have that choice. We don't want to only rely on fingers in one style and pedal only in another style or another context, right? If you know how to do that, though, is it cheating to not use the fingers? No. So let's say, June, you want to play this piece in a year or two from now, and you want to sit down and you just want to enjoy playing it, and you want to play it the way Mr. Norton notated for us with those holds. Notation shows what the music should sound like, most importantly, and we can create all of that sustain can create all of it exactly with the pedal also. So that is a great question, because that's why I wanted to take a look at it without pretending the pedal didn't exist. Yes, if you were really clever in looking at the score, you would see right away there is nothing here that the fingers have to do if the pedal's involved. Just so you can see that one more time. There is nothing in those three measures, the three full measures I'm showing, that the fingers only have to do that the pedal prohibits. So if I were sight reading this, if I were just playing it, not to teach it, but if I just wanted to play the piece, I see immediately that all of that sustain is created with the pedal. It does not need to be held by the fingers. But as a student, you really, 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 really want to learn how to do that with the hand. And this is a great example to get you started because it's only going to get more challenging from here as you go. There's only going to be more and more interesting and complex finger sustain that you're going to need to work on. So let's develop that skill earlier rather than later. And if you just at the end of your practice you say, I just want to enjoy playing the piece, fine, play through it and just use the pedal, and you can enjoy the sound of the music. But don't skip out on learning this. That's really important. That's a great question, June. Thanks for kicking off the stream with that question. Oh, and you had one other about bar 11 into 12. Oh, June, you say you're surprised your teacher didn't ask for it to be played without the pedal. If you were my student, I would have asked you to do that. Yeah. It doesn't, as a teacher, if we were here together, I'd still be able to see if you were doing it. I'd be able to see if the technique was being learned, whether the pedal was engaged or not. It's just, as you're practicing on your own, would be really eye-opening in your practice if you can do it without pedal. Oh, Can. Hello, Can. I'll answer that question, your last one that just came in real quick. I do not know when the Piano Light Grand will be available on Amazon. I do not know. I'm actually surprised that it's not yet because I've seen quite a few of them online. But I will follow up with Ben Q, my contacts there, and ask about it. Thanks for the question. Yeah. And when it is available, I'll put a link on my video because that's probably one of the reasons you're asking about it. So I'll put a link on my video when it comes available. Okay. Lovely stuff. Thanks again, June. Let's go back up to, I think it's Joseph's question. How does one decide which edition is a good edition to work on a particular piece, like Debussy's Arabesque No. 1? You say Debussy's Arabesque No. 1 has different triplets all over the place. Well, that hopefully you're not seeing editions that show different notation. First of all, Some editions maybe will show the 3 for the triplet on the first bar or two that it exists, and then it'll be omitted in the remainder of the piece where similar rhythms are written. That's just to save space, save clutter, assuming that once you have learned the motif the first time and you see it, that when you see it again in the future, you're going to know they're triplets because they're beamed in a group of 3 under a quarter note. You're not going to read them as eighth notes. Okay, so which edition is good? There are a couple general rules. For French music, the new Durand editions are usually great. Henley is usually good for Debussy also. I think those are the 2 I'd recommend. I'm trying to remember if there's a 3rd edition for Debussy and Ravel. That's great. If anybody knows it, drop it in the comments. But I don't remember. It's not coming to me off the top of my head. So those are the 2 places I would look. And if you really want a great Durand edition, don't get an original print. Don't get like a first edition, which is free. Sometimes on IMSLP you can find those for free. Actually buy the current score because there are updates and there are some fixes. Since you brought up Debussy, let me just give one example. Clair de Lune. Most of you know this piece, whether you've played it or not. This is not a Durand edition. I believe this is a Frémont, which is also a first edition. And there are a couple errors. Let me see if I can find them quickly. I thought there was one on the first page. That one's, I'm not seeing it right off the bat. But there is one for sure later on in the piece. Let me jump to that one. Oh, I've got notes from someone's lesson on here. Let's see. Okay, so here's one. Measure 61. What's actually written is, which has a C natural and a D flat. If you really read the score, D flat is already given in the key signature. That is an error in placement. It's not supposed to be D flat. It's supposed to be C flat down there, more like. So you still have D flat because it's given in the key signature, but it's supposed to be C flat to match what we get at the beginning of 59. C flat. I believe everybody gets this right on recordings. Nobody plays C natural. Everybody plays C flat. But it is misprinted there. So anyway, that's one reason. A lot of the misprints that happened in first editions of Debussy in particular, those are going to be fixed by later, newer editions. Joseph, you asked what edition is mine. This is a Frémont, which is the first edition of Clair de Lune. And this is just from IMSLP, and it's the same as what Dover reprinted in all of their paper scores. And they probably still use this edition. There's one other error in it, but it would take me a little bit to find what I'd have to play through the piece. There's a dot that's missing from a bar. It's a small thing, but there's still a little error. Yeah, you say international. Yeah, You could even look, if you've got paper copies, look in the title or the page before the contents, if it's a volume of works. But somewhere near the front of the book, there will probably be a reference to what edition was used. It'll say a reprint of blah, 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 and it'll give the edition and the year that it's from. So you can check that way. It should have that. There should be a reference. So, okay, going back to your question, Joseph, for Debussy, Durand, new Durand, and Henley is great. For Beethoven, Schumann, Schubert, I love Henley. For Mozart, I love Bärenreiter. For Bach, both Henley and Bärenreiter. For Rachmaninoff, if anybody's playing Rachmaninoff, Boosey and Hawkes. I think Gershwin is the same, Boosey and Hawkes. Oh, Chopin, of course. We can't miss Chopin. Chopin, I prefer editions by Ekier, edited by Ekier. Paderewski is very, very popular. I don't like his editions as much because I usually don't like his fingering suggestions, and I like Ekier's much more. But Paderewski is great, and Ekier's editions, which are the Polish National and the Wiener Urtext, those are also great editions. Thanks, Joseph, for the question. Why is Schirmer used so much? Because it's cheap. Schirmer is almost never a good edition if you want a real authoritative copy of the score. But yeah, they're usually like a fraction of the cost of a great edition. And there's more than that. There's more you get with a great edition. The notes are going to be spaced more nicely. You're going to have more room on the page. It's going to be easier to read. It's not going to be so crowded and cramped usually. But also the great editions, like the ones I'm referencing, they are full of extra study material. Where Schirmer is just a reprint of one edition that was published early when the piece when a piece was released. So Schirmer is just a reprint of something, and it hasn't been checked, and it hasn't been verified against any other copies. And that's, hey, Josip, and that's and so what you get if you buy an Urtext or you buy an Ekier edition of Chopin, for example, is you get all kinds of cross references between all of the original print editions, depending on where they were printed in Europe, because there are differences between first editions. Depending on where they were printed. And there are differences between first and second editions if the composer went back and corrected anything. And in the case of Chopin, for example, Ekier also adds in all kinds of references from either Chopin's own writings or notes from Chopin's pupils about how he taught his own work. So things that were never published in the scores, there'll be references in Ekier's editions that say, Chopin used this finger suggestion with this particular student. Or Chopin showed this division of hands, which is different than what was printed in the score with another student. So showing that the composer themselves saw many other options. Rarely changes of pitch. But usually other things like fingerings, hand division, possibly pedal markings. Sometimes, yes, they'll be incorrect. There'll be typos that get fixed. Oh, thank you, McZeppo, and welcome. Okay, let me go back to Mellow Vibes. You're working on a Schumann symphonic etude. Let me see if I can pull that music up. Definitely don't have a copy of it. So give me just a second. And then I can really see exactly how Schumann has divided the G-sharp arpeggiation that you're referencing. This would be a great time for in the chat. Drop stuff that you're working on. We've heard from a few people, but let us know all the repertoire that you're currently working on. After all of our talk about editions to use, here I am pulling up a Schirmer edition online. Because the great editions are never available for free. Oh, this says Schirmer, but it's in Russian. That's probably a reprint. So let's see. Etude. Mellow Vibes, do you have the Opus? Is it Opus 13? You say yes, 13. Okay. I'm scrolling pages trying to find number 11. 8. There it is. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so you said, beautiful piece, but in starting initially, you're not sold on how to relax, pivot your left hand. So let's see, 66. That is quick. I am not going to be able to read it that fast. But here's a little bit of what we're looking at. Oh, okay, it's just back and forth. Right? So. Okay. Great. Okay, you said it feels like pivoting on left ring finger, if that makes sense. I think we should change where we feel the fulcrum for the pivot from the left finger. From 4 to more like under the 3rd finger or the 2nd finger. So I am feeling the rotation. There is still rotation away from the 4th finger and toward the thumb side. In fact, try to feel the point of rotation, the point that we're pivoting around is actually under the 2nd finger, I think, because we need the 2nd finger involved in all of these chords. So we can't feel the fulcrum under 3 or between 2 and 3. Yeah. So that's... you could also practice this to get started without the G sharp in that left hand. So just practice the outer part of the rotation. Because that will really open up the hand a lot more and allow you to feel where that's going. That's made more difficult by the fact that there's a note thrown in there. And let's see, where things change. That is just a really difficult bar. So this is bar 1, 2, bar 3. I didn't download this into Fourscore. I'm just reading it off my browser, so I can't annotate on it. But bar 3 is at the end of the 2nd line. And the point of rotation changes to really between 2 and 3, or thumb 2, 3. Yeah, in bar 3 I'd play probably with a different kind of shaking motion in the hand. Instead of pivoting around the outer notes, which we did for bars 1 and 2, like this, 4 and 5, I would practice bar 3 going between the 2nd finger, thumb, and 3rd finger. I know it doesn't repeat. But feeling that before we add the 5th finger back in, because we're not going to be able to allow the hand to feel like it rotates into 5 because of what's happening in the middle of the hand. Yeah. And then the next, the second half of 3, where we go to A major, is back again, pivoting around 4 and 5. And next bar, 4 and 5. 4 and 5 again. And let's see. Again, 4 and 5. Okay. Yes. So mellow vibes. I hope that, does that help out? Do you have a follow-up about that? Let me know. I will keep this up in case we need to come back to it. But have fun with the piece. I've not played any of the symphonic etudes. What Schumann have I played? I've played Carnival. And I'm sure there's some other ones, but that was the big Schumann work that I've studied and performed. Absolutely mellow vibes. Okay, let me go back up and see where we are with the questions. Okay, let's see. Julio, I think Oh, Alexis, your question is next, and then Julio's. So, Alexis, you said you have a question on how you should think about wrist movement. Oh, and a downward arpeggio. Let's see, you're talking about a different piece. Winter Wind. Bar 11. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at that. And thanks, everybody. Thanks for your help in answering some of the other questions in the chat as we go. I will get to them, I promise. Let's see. Right hand, bar 11, descending arpeggios. All right, Alexis. This is going to be a learning moment for both of us, but let's see. I've not played this etude. Let's see, was that what we've got there? There we go. Okay, so your question is revolving around wrist movement and the descending arpeggio in 11. So here we go. Here's measure 11. That's in particular what we're looking at. Okay. The biggest thing that's sticking out for me, Alexis, is that as we descend, I would like to move the hand far enough and fast enough so that I'm not just crossing the fourth finger onto the G sharp. So not like a typical arpeggio finger cross, which would be like that, where the hand is coming over the top. I don't think that's going to be fast enough for us. So what I'd like to do is have the thumb leave the B, have the hand travel, and then be able to slightly rotate back into 4. Like that. So let me show both of those ways again. So not a finger cross over the thumb where we play with full finger legato. There's going to be too much tension and the hand's not going to move fast enough. And then not just moving the hand and shifting, but also incorporating the continued rotation that we're feeling. Each one of these, rotation toward the outside of the hand, inside, outside, inside. Even here, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside. So even though the fourth finger comes over the thumb, we're still continuing to feel the same rotational elements that exist throughout the rest of the passage. Yeah? Alexis, does that help out? Ah, good. Good, I'm glad. Take it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Alexis. My pleasure. Yeah. Oh, yeah, great stuff. I never personally had a desire to play that etude. But it's a great study, for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Joseph. I'll thanks. Yeah, when you incorporate the right technique in small bursts like this, yeah, it's not as much of a struggle as it looks like on the page. Yeah. So if you know that ahead of time, great. That's part of the reason, even though I haven't played the piece before, with just a few minutes, it's still not at a performance tempo, but it's much, I would say, well on the way, right, after just a few minutes. Okay. Julio, your question was next. Left-hand chords in some Satie from measures 24 and beyond. See, I'm pretty sure I have these pieces on here. Are you allowed to arpeggiate these chords in Satie's Gymnopédie number 1? Measure 24 and beyond. Okay, so if you don't know this piece, right? Okay, that should refamiliarize you with it. And let's see, some of you, it looks like some of you answered some of this. So my turn to give my 2 cents. So measure 24, 22, 23, 24. These chords and beyond. Those are a little easier, but then we have the ones that are a 9th there. Okay. You have a habit, you say, of increasing your hand span, and it becomes locked, tensed, and rigid. Julio, what is a comfortable stretch for you? I'm assuming you have an octave, but is playing an octave and a triad comfortable? And without the skips in the piece, is playing that same triad but moving the 5th finger up a 9th? Is that comfortable? Can we do that outside of the piece itself? Or maybe, we could even take measure 24 is basically this. It's a G major chord in 2nd inversion, but the thumb is moved up. So we have a 9th between 5 and 1. So Julio, are you able to play just the octave, and is that comfortable? And from this position, can you extend the thumb without coming from the jump? Maybe Julio is trying it out. By the way, hello to Suzanne. I didn't get to say hello to some people that are here. So hello, Suzanne. And hello. I see McZeppo has a question. I didn't get to say hi to B. Booker, but I'm glad they were here. And Newt Boy. Welcome back, Newt Boy. We'll see if Julio chimes in a second here, and then we'll keep going. Hey, Carlos. A little downtime is nice. Gives me a second to sip some coffee. Okay. Good question, Julio. Are you allowed to play the octave instead? No. Sorry. We don't want to change the octave, and here's why. There are two options. Let's rephrase this a little bit. So if you can stretch to the ninth, and you can play it, and it's not the maximum stretch that you have. For example, I could add another, in my own hand, I could play a 10th. So there's the octave, the ninth, the 10th. I could not do a major 10th without rolling it, but I could hold everything. So if we call that my maximum, then a ninth is far less. So part of our answer depends on how much further can we go with a stretch that actually fits our hand. That is not necessarily comfortable, but that's possible. And then we can decide, is the comfort here something that we need to work on because our hand is capable of more? Or is it something that is already at the maximum of what we can do and we need to work on rolling it or omitting a note? Those are the questions we kind of need to ask. So that depends, Julio. If you have a ninth and it might not be a comfortable stretch, but if you can go further and if you can play a 10th, the answer is we should work on making a ninth more comfortable. And in these bars, we should release it and not try to hold everything down, just because everything in Sati is under the pedal. So you can just let those go. You don't have to hold. Okay, secondly, if the ninth is too uncomfortable and it's too big of a stretch for us, don't just play an octave, because the color note, the note that adds so much character, is the E. That's the ninth above 5. It's technically, I guess, in this case, yeah, 6 of the chord. So if you were going to omit a note, you would omit 5, because 5 is doubled here and here. And it's also in the melody, so we still get the character of the piece and we get exactly what we're looking for without the D. So let me show you that here. So my hand would just jump to a chord voicing that's more like what Satie uses earlier in the piece. Same thing in the next bar. No, that one would change. We wouldn't use the D in that case. So let's go back to the sheet music. The next 2 bars, if we were going to omit a note, I'm going to put X's over the possible omissions. It would be that one, and then these. This is all based on compositionally where we're coming from. We don't want to omit a note that is really important to the harmony that's being built. So in 24, the E is really important. In the next 2 bars, it's really the E and the F that we want to see the difference of. But if we omit the C at the bottom of the chord, that chordal harmony with everything in fourths, it doesn't sound like Satie anymore. So we don't want to do that. Okay, now, next step. Can we roll the chords or split them, which is, I think, some of what was going on in the chat. I wouldn't do that in this piece. I wouldn't either roll nor split. So that would be a roll. And a split would be, for example, like that. I wouldn't do either of those because the pulse on 1 and 2 in this piece is too important. The piece begins with that sense of pulse. Even though this is kind of a very ambient piece of music, that feeling of pa and kind of expansion of harmony on beat 2, that needs to be retained throughout the entire course of the piece. And if we roll, we lose that. If I play back here, or next bar, we'd be more in line with the compositional intent to play that instead, because it's going to keep that correlation with everything else that the left hand has going on. I think that's different than the advice, Julio, you got in the chat. If I go back through, I think I'm not going to be able to find it quickly, but I think there were many people talking about rolling and splitting the chords. And often that is a great solution. That can work. But it really depends on the piece and the composer and the context, again. So, Julio, does that make sense? Are we good? It definitely makes those bars... Well, it takes away the stretch, which is what's making those measures complicated and challenging for you. And they shouldn't be challenging to play. So if it's simply a matter of we just can't play all of those notes across a ninth, don't roll them, just omit the least important. Omit a note that is doubled, or omit a note that is don't omit the color note. Don't omit the note that is showing a difference or showing inner voice leading. Don't omit that one. Don't omit the note that provides the most color to the harmony. Omit something that's doubled. Oh, awesome, Whitney. Let's see, Whitney, I have not gotten to your question. I see it now. So, Whitney, you had said sometimes you have chords that you just can't reach. Is it best to drop off the lowest note or one in the middle, or is it more case-by-case thing? Yeah, well, when I work on this with students, it's very case-dependent. And sometimes it even depends on the position of the note within the hand and how the student's hand works. So sometimes in the left hand, playing something with the fourth finger, 4, 5, 4, 2, 1, is really challenging. And we might omit 4, or sometimes we might omit 2. And it depends on the position that the hand is in, the size of the hand, and whether is it a technical thing that we need to work on, where we need to work on stretching to that point in a good way, in a healthy way, or is it something where the size of the hand is simply a limiting factor and we have to provide a workaround for that. So, okay. Let's see. Thanks everybody. I see Alexis as I'm reading through the chat. Alexis, you and Nancy. Oh, Nancy had an interesting comment about taking some notes with the right hand. Yeah. Hey. Let's point that out. Nancy, I didn't even think of that today. But you are absolutely right. Let me see if that at all changes our ability to show the phrase. Okay. I'll give one caveat to what Nancy suggested for this. So I misinterpreted the word split because I didn't read all the chat. So when I demonstrated split before, I was splitting one note off, which is something that we can do in some other music. One note off and playing that first and then playing the rest second. So like that. But Nancy pointed out that these are already split between the staves, right? And they are across. I have never played this piece in that way because I don't believe the staff split is intended to be played by one hand versus the other. And we can kind of prove that by going back to the top of the piece. If we look at this as a split for hands, it would be impossible to play the first notes in the right hand. Right? That is a spread of a major 10th, and the next one's even further. So despite the score showing a split between, we'll call it hands, it's really just notated that way for the sake of positioning the notes on a staff. It's not showing that the hands play a split. That said, as long as you understand that that's not everywhere, you could employ that down here, only where we need to. So starting in 20, not even in 22, I would continue to play that. Left hand playing the stems down, right hand playing stem ups. And when we get to 24, take the E with the right hand thumb. And then the next bar, you can take the D with the right hand thumb. Sure. There's one caveat to that. Nancy said, the score doesn't look anything like Schirmer. Well, we talked about Schirmer. And you say in number 2, there's even more shared notes between right hand and left hand. The one caveat to this is that you must, if you're going to take some of the harmony notes, some of the accompanimental note with the right hand, you must play it in the same, with the same color and the same dynamic as you're playing the left hand. And the thumb in the right hand cannot play with the same articulation the melody's getting, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity to the piece. So if you are, like, let's say a late beginner, early intermediate pianist working on this, and this is a stretch piece for you, it's a challenge, it's probably going to be more of a challenge to not bring out the thumb and to voice toward the top of the hand. As soon as that thumb comes in, I'm misvoicing it on purpose. Hear how loud the E is? Whereas if you don't take it with the right hand, that note is still there. I'm playing it as written for the left hand. It's a totally different color. And there's no problem playing the intended color when it's not split between the hands, but it becomes a really big issue when we do take some of the accompaniment with the right hand and the melody. Is it possible? Yes. But I would argue that increases the difficulty of the piece substantially beyond where it should lie. So Nancy, you say, what edition is it? You know, I'm not sure. Oh, it's Peters. It's a Peters edition. I can tell that, by the way, at the very bottom of the page. That's edition Peters. Peters is usually pretty good. Okay. So all that to say, you could choose to play some of that with the right hand, but I think it'll be more successful. You could try it both ways. I think it'll be more successful if you omit a note and play the accompanimental texture with the left hand rather than sharing textures with the right hand. But if you want to work on playing your right hand upper voicings, so making sure melody comes out despite playing multiple notes in the hand, you can work on that. But that is a more advanced skill than usually where we are when we're first playing a piece like this. So that's up to you, Julio. And Nancy, if you're playing the piece too, yeah, Nancy, you're saying in number 2, you said there's even more notes. And you're saying shared between the hands, but again, in all of these cases, once again, everything that is stemmed down is intended by the composer to be played with left hand, not shared between the hands. And most of the time here, you can absolutely see, here's a great example. That would be impossible to play with the right hand by itself. Physically, I don't even know if Rachmaninoff could even stretch that. So that's more proof that the division between the staves is not a division between hands. It's purely for the sake of reading these high pitches for left hand in the middle of a clef instead of all on ledger lines above the bass clef. Or, writing a treble clef down here and then marking that whole thing, every bar. That would also be a really messy way to read that. Okay. Good stuff. Let me see where we are with our questions. Let's see, I think we are to Newt Boy. Oh, well, you didn't have a question. Let's see, maybe you did later. I'm seeing your list of repertoire. Great stuff. Dith, I see your choices for your level 7, which include possibly for release. Have fun. I know. Everybody really should play that. I know it kind of has a reputation for being overplayed, but it's an important piece. Let's see. Suzanne, you said about the Chopin Waltz in A minor. you're interested in a short video on bar 21. I bet I know which measure that is. Oh, yeah. I can give you a really quick answer, Suzanne, especially if you're still here. So we know this bar. It's in the middle of this segment. And this bar. It's a bar of an arpeggio that extends 1, 2.5 octaves. Suzanne, the biggest tip is don't tuck the thumb under the third finger. Like that. Fast arpeggios, which we need to play here, we have to just move the hand so that there might be a little residual thumb tuck, but we're not over tucking and we're not over twisting at the wrist like this, right? Not twisting, because all of the twisting back and forth is going to slow us down and make us inaccurate, but rather, let me put it this way. When I'm playing this measure, the thumb is coming under the hand to its fullest extent, or most fullest extent, I guess, without any turn in the wrist. Yeah. So there's still thumb activity, but it's not doing this for every octave, because that not only slows us down where the thumb comes under, it makes it really hard to get the second finger on the right pitch. And that's not just in this arpeggio, but any piece that has arpeggios like this. So in ways we've talked about practicing this on the stream before, always practice your arpeggios in 2 ways. With finger legato, because we want to know what that feels like in case we need to finger legato something, and then completely moving without putting an accent on the thumb. Yeah? So practice both of those ways, and then we can apply it to this bar. That's the biggest tip. We don't want to get stuck with misaligned movement. Okay. So, okay, Newt Boy, you did have a question, and I'm getting to it now. What's the best way to bring a piece up to tempo? Incremental metronome bumps are so tedious. Is a quick burst ever a good idea, even if it's a bit sloppy, to prime your fingers or your brain? Yes. So the answer to that question is it goes both ways, the 2 things that you mentioned. We can use occasional quick bursts in tempo to show us where problems lie. It's not going to really help us to solidify playing something. We're not going to want to do a lot of repetitions at a fast tempo. That's just going to make our playing sloppy, really. So we don't want to do that, but we can test things out at a fast tempo and say, using the Chopin as an example, test it at the tempo you'd like to play. Find a recording of the piece, get it in your ear. How fast does this pianist play that arpeggio? You try to play that arpeggio. The most important thing during that playthrough, give yourself 1 or 2 times, and that's it. We want to pay attention to see if you can feel exactly where the holdup is. Where is the problem? Where are we missing a note? Are we overshooting the octave? Just using this as one example, right? Are we overshooting an octave? Is the second finger missing G sharp? Are we incorporating too much turn in the wrist? Is our thumb slamming because we're over maybe rotating back into the thumb when we cross? Is that a problem? We want to identify all of them that exist if we can. If there are too many, pick one or two to work on, and then immediately go back to a slow tempo and focus on fixing that one or those two things that we heard that were wrong at the faster tempo. Then I know you said it's tedious to do incremental metronome bumps, but that's really important. And make a plan for yourself about how far you're going to bump the tempo of something in a given time. So what I love to do is I'll give a student, if we're going to divide out our goal tempo among, depending on the difficulty of the piece. Let's just say we have a month. We have a month to get to goal tempo. Let's divide that month into 4 weeks. Okay, and now every 4 weeks, we know exactly how much faster we need to make it. And depending on the difficulty and depending on how fast we need to go, we might skew some of our extra speed toward the beginning of the month because it's going to become more and more difficult as the month goes on to keep increasing just a couple beats per minute. So maybe if we need to increase 40 beats per minute over the span of 4 weeks, maybe we're going to do 15 or 16 of those beats per minute the first week. And that's not a jump of 16 in one day. That's a jump of 3 or 4, say 3 per day. That's it. 3 beats per minute for most people is almost indiscernible, an indiscernible change in tempo. And we take those little bits, right? So 3 beats per minute. Maybe try doing 6 your first day with the idea that when you start your second day or you start your third day practicing this, you're no longer starting at the beginning of our tempo. You're starting 1 bump in, and then we start 2 bumps in, and then we're always going a little bit further and a little bit further. As we get through now the first week, we've done, what is that, about 40% of our needed tempo increase, and we've done that in 1 week. Now we have 3 more weeks to do the remaining 60%. Great. Maybe in the second week, instead of doing 15 beats per minute, we do 10. And now we're at 25 of the 40 we needed to go up. In the third week, we do 8. And the fourth week, we do 8. And that gets us to approximately 40. But notice how that's skewed, right, toward the early side of our practice, because we're going to make progress more quickly and the technique isn't going to be as difficult. And as we need more time and more repetitions, more practice, we're not going to ask as many increases in BPM per day. When you get to an increase of only 8 beats per minute over the span of a week, we're talking about 1 beat per minute per day. You can definitely do that. So on weeks like that, try to go 2 or 3 beats per minute in a day. And then the next day, don't start at 60, start at 61 and do another 2 or 3 beats per minute. And then start at 62 the day after and do another 2 or 3 beats per minute. Nathaniel, you say when speed bumping, I call it tempo laddering. When speed bumping like that, I don't even think I have a short I was going to make about this. And I don't think I ever released it. It might even be edited. So Nathaniel says when bumping up like that, is it divided into sections? That depends on where you are with the piece. It's going to be easier to bump more quickly if we have small sections. And that is another way of going about it. We're going to more quickly be able to reach our goal tempo if we're only talking about a bar or maybe 4 bars at a time. But then stringing an entire phrase together or an entire piece together, that's going to be harder. So it depends. When I was doing a little bit of extra practice last year on Chopin's Opus 10 number 1. And I did that every day. I would do tempo bumping, which I'm not going to be able to play it very well today. But I would start the day here, and I'd usually do just a page or two at a time. So that's considerably less than the entire etude. And I'd start there with a metronome. A few repetitions later. This is faster. It's almost unnoticeably faster. A few repetitions later. I'm saying I would go through the 2 pages even though I'm only playing half a bar. And then I'd be here. And then... And if any of that happened, where I missed a note, it's too fast. Go back. Focus on what I missed. Go back a tempo, a notch. Make sure that it's perfect and I've got it, and then increase again. And I would do about 20 beats per minute per day, with the expectation that the next day I would probably lose. I wouldn't be able to start where I left off. I would probably lose 10 to 15 beats per minute of the increase. Meaning it wouldn't be perfect, but I could start 10 or 15 less, which would still be an increase of 5 to 10 per day. I could start a little bit less and then continue to go from there. Yeah, my pleasure, Newt Boy. Thanks for the question. Great question. And then, yeah, just to sum up Nathaniel's part of the question, I don't think I would ever play an entire piece and use this tempo laddering approach. If we're ready to play an entire piece of music, let's think about what we're doing at that point in our learning, if we've done our previous learning well, is we're just taking the component parts that we've already worked highly on and we're stringing them together. So the difference is we might need to build stamina to do that. We might need to work on being able to execute a certain type of technique, like in the etude. Well, now, instead of only doing it for 30 seconds at a time, the whole etude, we have to employ that technique for 3 minutes. I think that's about the length, 3 or 4 minutes. That's considerably harder. Yes and no. Because if you're playing a page at a time correctly, it's not going to be any harder to play the whole thing. It's going to maybe be more focus, but physically it shouldn't be any harder. It'll only be physically harder if we actually haven't attained the tempo and with good and proper technique and in a relaxed way. So if we start to feel like, oh my gosh, especially if I guess I'm kind of saying that from my perspective, having spent a lot of time on the bench, playing for 5 minutes should never feel difficult because I've given 80 and 90 minute long performances. 5 minutes should never feel hard. If playing for 5 minutes in a stretch with complete focus, playing one piece through beginning to end, if that's a relatively new experience for you, that can be difficult in itself. And then again, that grows over time. So, it's the same thing we were talking about the RCM leveling system earlier. The repertoire, as the levels go up, right? Not only does the repertoire get longer, but you have more and more pieces to present, and it does a really nice kind of bridging of the student forward so that we go from playing 3 pieces earlier in the leveling system, 3 pieces that might be 30 or 45 seconds long each, to now we have 6 pieces, 7 pieces that might be 2 to 3 minutes long each. And eventually that moves into, longer, even longer spans. I think I answered that question for you, Nathaniel. Oh, McZeppo. Yeah, McZeppo, I think I answered your question. If you didn't catch it, I will go through it again. But otherwise, I think I'm going to skip over your question because it was about a basic E major arpeggio like the one in the Chopin waltz that we just talked about. Awesome. Great. I'm glad to hear that. Let's see. Mike, welcome, Mike. Oh, great question, Mike. Mike says, wondering if there are any tips on how to quickly recognize notes on ledger lines. So you say you're aware of A, C, E above and below treble and bass staves, but can never remember them at sight. There are two approaches to this. Okay. All right. I'm glad you're still here, Mike. Thanks. Oh, let's see. Let's use this. It's time for some handwritten music. All right. Let's work on treble clef first. So yeah, primarily this boils into two things. The first is getting to know each ledger line one at a time and what they are. And that's just purely a recognition of a spatial recognition on the page. So getting to know that one ledger line, if you see one line, it's A. If you see two lines, it's C. For most people, that's going to be the limit that you need to learn. Learning three ledger lines, there's not going to be very many opportunities or times when you need to sight read that and know that it's an E. But that said, the second way to do this is to read intervals instead. So let's say that we know F. We know what the lowest or the highest lined note on the treble clef is. Well, if we need to go up two ledger lines, but we don't know what note two ledger lines up is, what interval is that? We should be able to read the interval very, very quickly. Hello, fan. Thank you. So, Mike, what interval is that one? Yes, it's a fifth. Perfect. It's also a perfect fifth. If we know that it's a fifth and we know our intervals well, you don't need to know what pitch, you don't need to know off the top of your head or in isolation what pitch that one is. You know that it's a fifth above F, and a fifth above F is C, if we know our intervals well. And now we can say, if we're looking at the keyboard and there was that F, C is a fifth above. And we're reading instead of by a letter name, we're reading by interval instead. The same thing applies when we want to go further. Let's use F again. This is more complicated, but let's say I'm going to stack them this time. You've got that note. So it's three ledger lines and a space. That one, if I erase our F, if you just had three ledger lines in a space, that's fairly challenging to read. It's really far off the staff. With a lot of experience, you'd know what note it is. But the easier way to know what note it is to read the interval between those two. And what interval do we have this time? Anybody can answer that, by the way. It doesn't have to just be Mike. Yes, Newt Boy says octave, Mike, eighth or octave. That's right. Okay, well, what's an octave above F? Another F. So now we know. Okay, that top note, we don't have to count the ledger lines because we're reading the interval. And when we see a blocked harmonic or melodic interval, so a blocked or broken interval, we've done enough reading music like that to know that, for example, let's do this better. Better than that. That note and that note are an octave away. And this note and 1, 2, 3, that note are an octave away. And if it's truly on a piece of printed music, they're going to be exactly the same distance spatially as well. There's not going to be any difference between handwritten ledger lines and what's on the staff. Same goes for any other interval. Let's do, let's switch staves. We'll leave all that out. If we look in the bass clef and we look down, so let's say we know, We'll again use the lowest line to get us started. And now we need to know 3 ledger lines down. What is 3 ledger lines down on the bass clef? Well, the easiest way, if you don't know what the pitch is right away, is to read the interval instead. What interval do we have this time? Yes, Mike, 7th. Perfect. Not a perfect 7th, but yes, you got the answer correct. And Newt Boy, yes. So if we read a 7th down from G, then we know that the lowest pitch is A. As you do more and more, yes, Nancy, that is perfect. That perfect analogy. You say it's like reading words, whole words, rather than sounding out phonics, or reading like an individual letter at a time. Yes, absolutely. Where this becomes really challenging is, let's say, like we have some kind of passage in the bass clef that begins like down there. I have, off the top of my head, if that existed just in space on a page, or if it began a piece, I don't know what 4.5 ledger lines down is off the top of my head. I really only can read by note name down to the 3rd ledger line. So that one. So I know that that one's an A. And I would have to either go down by 3rd plus a 2nd, so E, down from there. But what would be so much easier is if I had that note plus that, I can immediately read. That's an octave. Because the interval is really recognizable, whereas the note by itself is not at all. Yeah, Newt Boy, you also said, yeah, interval recognition is key in sight reading. It is. Interval recognition and any other patterns that we can recognize. Yeah. So, yeah. Mike, you said, like, are there any more, to ways to more quickly recognize the notes? This is the best way to do that. And there is only really, as pianists, we don't really need to be able to sight read much beyond the 3rd ledger line in any direction, really ever. There are occasions, yeah, where you'll have music that does exist down there. Most of the time, you're not going to have to sight read it. It's not going to be like you're accompanying someone and you're throwing a piece of music and it's got ledger lines all over the place. And you have to play it right, and you got to play it right the first time. Sight reading exams through, RCN level 10, they're not going to include anything that's that far away. So those are pretty extreme circumstances. And the way I do it is all by interval recognition. So, like I said, I don't know 4 ledger lines in a space down from the bass staff, but if it's given with any interval, and most of the time it's going to be an octave, it's that in that register, it's mostly going to be an octave, just because of what good composition is down there. We're not going to have other pitches like that, because it sounds bad. Nobody's going to write that. So that interval recognition just immediately gives me the answer. I don't need to know what the letter name is. Yes. Okay, great. Oh, Nancy? Yeah, so Nancy had said your teacher was a phonics person and they wrote the letter names all over your music in ink. I physically feel for you. I never had something like that happen to me, but I did have a teacher at a festival that was very frustrated with my playing, and they took my score, my Henley edition, paper edition, and they scribbled all over my page in pen. I will never forget the lesson. and I have permanent markings from them. But I don't even remember what piece it is, but it's very distracting when you open back up to it. Like, oh my gosh, it's way more visually obvious to read the scribbles than to actually read the music. And Nancy, you said that's why you say you hate Beethoven. Is it maybe because of the really thick chord voicings? Even Beethoven didn't write just two pitches down there, or a triad. It was almost always accompanied by an octave, right? And I don't even know if it was that low. Yeah. I don't know if he had an E. But usually more here. Oh, okay. The ink from your teacher all over Moonlight Sonata. Oh, that's too bad. I'm very sorry to hear that. And that's yeah. That's the last way I encourage anybody to read music. Yeah, because your understanding now, Nancy, is so much better. Yeah. And Bedlington Groomer, you say, yeah, you love Fourscore because you can make as many scribbles as you want and then get rid of them. Let's see. So, Mike, you had a follow-up question here. You say, do you have a method of developing interval reading on ledger lines? Okay. You say you actually have to read a lot of them because you're playing Jason Robert Brown and nothing seems to work. I don't know if I have any. If I have an example of Jason Robert Brown, I'll pull some up. I don't. But I've played some and I know what you mean. Mike, I would say you have to go a step beyond, which is learning to read melodic intervals really, really well. Or choosing a note, whether that's like the first ledger line down, choosing a note that becomes your landmark for maybe the rest of the measure. So if it's the first ledger line in bass clef, that's going to be E. And then as a passage progresses and moves along, instead of reading every interval from the previous note, you read it in relation to the E, the first ledger line down. So then we're reading intervals in a slightly different way. We're comparing to one landmark that we feel really confident in, rather than saying we have a second down and a third down from this note and then a fourth down from that note. But that requires you to take the information that is extended horizontally and kind of reduce it back to being vertical. That just takes practice and doing it a lot. You could, hey Con, you could, in some of that music, you could take a blank piece of staff paper and write out some of those intervals. And the act of writing it out and going through that process by hand, away from the keyboard, that's also going to help some too. But the biggest thing is just continuing to do it. So you have three methods there. There is reading interval to interval from one note to the next, picking a landmark note and reading all of the intervals if they're way off the staff, reading everything from one landmark. And as your reading gets better and better, that landmark won't just be one line below bass clef. It'll start to be two, and then it'll be three. And once you're 3 lines down, the maximum interval you're ever going to see is an octave, the lowest note at the piano. So you'll never have anything beyond to have to navigate, and even that is going to be really rare. And then also take your melodic intervals and rewrite them on paper as harmonic intervals, and start to get used to seeing them and seeing the distance. And then your brain says, oh, I know I've got to collapse that. You take the time to physically write it down, and we start to program that method in. Yeah. Good. That was a great question, Mike. Yeah, my pleasure, Mike. Well, I actually think I got through all the questions. That's amazing. If there, yeah, I mean, if we've got one more, I could do one more, or we could call it a day. Either way. And McZeppo, I'm glad to see here that, yeah, just a little change in your approach to that passage. The arpeggios helped out. Awesome. Hey, if you haven't already, could you click the thumbs up button for me? I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Whitney. I missed that question. We'll end with that question, Whitney. You had asked if I ever lacked motivation to practice and how I overcame it. I have two answers for you, Whitney. First, I don't think there's ever been a time in my life that I haven't wanted to practice and play music. I don't think I've ever experienced that. Usually, especially these days, it's kind of the opposite issue where I want to practice so much and I just don't have time to come and sit down and do as much as I'd like to. But it's always on my mind, like, I want to practice. I really want to practice. And I might only have 30 minutes or an hour in a particular day. And the rest of the day, I'm sitting at my computer, doing whatever I need to do, and thinking, I'd rather be practicing. But I can say that remember why you started to play the piano and why you enjoy music in the first place. Think about that. If you're feeling like you're stuck with some pieces, or like you just don't want to sit down on the bench and do any work, think about why you started playing the piano in the first place. That's the first thing. Secondly, you could also take some music that you already know really well, and maybe without even planning to go practice, say, I'm just going to sit down and play. I'm going to play a piece or two, and I'm going to enjoy the process of playing, just the act of playing and the act of making music. I'm just going to sit and enjoy that. And if that happens to turn into, I got to sit and practice for an hour, great. And if you play a couple pieces that you've learned previously, and you just enjoy them, and you finish, and you say, I still don't really feel like practicing, then just don't. Just walk away for a little bit. That's fine. Alexis's comment is... that worked for me, Alexis. Things like that work for me. They don't work for everybody. Alexis said, once you see a video of an 11-year-old boy or 11-year-old playing like Liszt Transcendental Etudes, I would include Chopin Etudes, or maybe some just amazing Mozart Sonata or Concerto or something like that, or Un Sospiro. You'll see a lot of 11-year-olds playing Un Sospiro. That could be motivational. For the right person, it can be. And for other people, it can just be like, oh my gosh, why am I wasting my life doing this? For me, I was always that kind of person that if I saw somebody, and that was actually something that really propelled me forward, was getting beaten in a competition when I was 14, getting beaten by an 8-year-old. That was the most horrible experience for me. And I really, really didn't want it to happen again. So I worked my butt off to try to be sure that it wouldn't happen again. And that was really motivating. But for a lot of people, that could be the moment in time that makes them give up completely. And we definitely don't want that. Yeah. So Whitney, you said, yeah, step back sometimes. Yes, that's okay. The other aspect, though, is look for little ways that you are still making progress. So like what you just said, you think you get frustrated when you don't progress as fast as you want to. I mean, how fast do you want to progress, Whitney? And what is the goal? What is your goal in playing? And if you do have like a goal of getting to a certain point within a certain amount of time, that can be great, and we can try to stick to a plan. But like Whitney, do you have a teacher that you see in person? Because they should also be telling you, and I tell my students when they get frustrated, we have time. We have time to get from point A to point B. We're not in a rush. You're not taking auditions. You're not going to a competition where you've got 2 weeks or 4 weeks and we have to maybe, take a piece from just being started and have it performance ready. There's not that pressure. That pressure is fairly rare for most people that are studying the piano. It's not rare if you decide you want that in your life, but then you know what you're signing up for when you do that. Okay, Whitney. Yeah. A good teacher should talk to you about this kind of stuff and should also be able to say, hey, here's all of the ways, and I do this with my students when I sense they're getting frustrated. I take a step back and we take the piece that we might be working on and I say, look, 4 weeks ago, this wasn't going well, and this wasn't going well, and this wasn't going well. And today, you had all of those things fixed. Or if they weren't fixed, you've made a lot of progress in each of those areas. And we can see it here and here and here, and here's how, and I can see how your hand is moving. And I talk them through everything that I'm seeing that are improvements that day to day in your practice, they're happening, but as the person that's working on it, you might not see them as readily. I, as the teacher, because I only get a weekly check-in, they're really obvious to me. When someone comes back and we've worked on wrist position and playing a scale, and 2 weeks later, it's so good, but they come to me and they say, I don't really know if I'm doing it better. I mean, if sometimes I can show them a video and say, here's 2 weeks ago, and here's today. It's only been 14 days, and this is a huge dramatic difference. And actually, you could do some of that yourself too, Whitney, if you record some of your playing. Record some of your playing, like just as a check-in at the end of your practice. I like to, I don't know where my phone is, but I like to put my phone up right here, and I'll just record my hands playing, and I'll do that once in a while. And I tell my students to do the same thing. And it's not a recording session. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to, there's no pressure. It's just a document. It's just documentation of where we are on that particular day. And if you don't delete it, import it to your computer, put it on Google Drive, something like that, where you can keep it for a long, long time and title it with the day and what you were working on. And then 2 months later, when you're still working on the same piece and you feel some of that frustration, go back and watch your video that you made 2 months prior. And you're going to say, oh my gosh, I have come so far. And things are so much better. And that in itself might be enough motivation to say, oh, look at how far I've come. And if I continue to work just as hard as I have been, look at how far I'm going to go in the future. Instead of saying like, I'm frustrated and I just don't want to play. Seth, you said, Seth, what part were you commenting on? Because it doesn't feel better? Was that because of playing itself, or because of watching kids that are insanely gifted? Yeah, June, you said going back and playing something you love is a good motivator. Yeah. So Seth, you're saying in terms of comfort, even though you're improving, it doesn't feel better. So to that, I would have one more comment. And that is, that music is always about the journey we're taking. The journey we're taking through individual pieces, the journey we're taking over years of working on stuff. I compose and play professionally. I'm still on that journey. And I hope that my own playing is different and hopefully, I would say, better in some way 10 and 20 years from now than it is today. Just like I can definitely say, even though I still play some of the same repertoire I played when I was a teenager and taking auditions, I definitely feel like I play that repertoire better today than I did 20 years ago. And if I don't feel that way 20 years from now, I've done something wrong. So I fully expect that things are going to continue to change. And I hope that they do. And I want to do the work on myself and my own playing that continues to allow them to change. Right? And so it's all about the journey. And each day, we just do the best we can. And that can be good enough. The best we can, it's not that it can be good enough, it is good enough. And it doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be any other thing imposed on that. We just tried. And everybody that's here, I mean, you wouldn't be taking the time out of your day to come here and watch the live stream or watch other videos if you weren't really interested in making progress and actually getting better, right? And knowing that in the back of our mind goes a really, really long way. So even if it doesn't feel like things are getting better, just take a second and say, you know what? I'm doing the best. I'm doing the best I can. And we partly have to trust the process and trust that I've done good work. It is making a difference. I might not be able to feel it right now, but I might feel it in another month or two. That can feel like it's a long way away, but in the grand scheme of things, you're going to play the piano, hopefully, the rest of your life, right? A month or two, it's not that long. And Mixepo, yes, you said you have to find the right pieces. But when you've got pieces coming that you love, that you're really excited. Yeah, and the literature, like, yes, you said the literature is so vast. There's enough music to choose from that you like most of the time. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Nathaniel, you're also right there. Repertoire really opens up at level 4, 5 ABRSM. That would be RCM level 6, 7. Yeah, you get to a certain point, and all of a sudden, there's the vast literature from the great composers starts to become accessible, or they start to become projects that you can work on. And as soon as you're past Album for the Young by whatever composer, or at the end of those kinds of pieces, oh my goodness. Yeah, the literature opens up into more than you would ever be able to learn in a lifetime. So, yeah, there are a lot of choices. Alexis, yeah, so Alexis is now practicing a huge Chopin etude, and you said you just remember that a couple years back only you were struggling with grade 1. And isn't that amazing to be playing a Chopin etude when not that long ago you were just starting out? Yeah. Thanks, Whitney. Okay, we're going to call it a day. That was a really nice question to end with. So thanks, Whitney, for the question. Oh, gosh. Good times. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Let's see. We have another stream in 2 weeks on April 23rd. Hey, a reminder to everybody that's still here. If you have any questions for my teacher who's going to be here filming with me next week, drop them in the comments below this video or send me an email with your questions. I have a dedicated video slot for doing a Q&A. It won't be live with him. We won't be able to do that. But taking questions from all of you, whatever comes in, and hopefully that we can get to in like a 30-minute video, and having him answer those for all of you. So feel free to drop that down below or send me an email. And always also remember, you can always submit a video of yourself playing for a masterclass segment. And I take those on first come, first serve. Bellington Groomer said, hit the like button, hit the thumbs up, please. And hopefully see you all in 2 weeks. Yes. Nathaniel, practice harder, not smarter. Okay, Nathaniel. Let's say today, enjoy practicing. How about that? Let's enjoy practicing. And I will see you all hopefully in 2 weeks.